My name is Hugh Ferrer, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to a Friday panel here at the Iowa City Public Library. Our thanks, as always, to the public library staff and to International Programs for sponsoring the pizza that the television audience is watching you eat. It's my pleasure today to introduce Writing the Not Self. We asked the writers to consider a number of questions about what it means to write the other, and you're going to hear a range of different answers. It's going to be an exciting panel, and I hope that as you're listening, you prepare questions. I'll introduce each of the writers in advance now, then we'll hear their papers, and then we'll move into Q&A. So I'll introduce people left to right. Arai Takako has published 3 poetry collections, including Tamashii Dansu, transliterated to Soul Dance, which won the 2008 Oguma Hideo Prize. Since 1998, she has been an editor for the poetry journal Mite. She has also edited a volume of poems about and is producing a film connected to the 2011 earthquake and tsunami in northern Japan. The poem volume Factory Girls is forthcoming in English, and you can attend a reading at Prairie Lights on Monday evening at 7 p.m. She and her translator, Jeffrey Engels, will be presenting that volume. Arai teaches Japanese and poetry at Saitama University, and she joins us courtesy of the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs at the U.S. Department of State. Next to her, the Atayal writer and activist Wallace Nokan founded the Hunter Culture magazine, which developed into the Research Center for Humanities of Taiwan's Aboriginal peoples. An author of 24 books, including most recently a volume of flash fiction called, in transliteration, Path of Dreams. He has received awards that include the United Daily News Critics' Top Honors for Prose and the Ministry of Education's Award for Literary Creation. He participates in the fall residency courtesy of the Ministry of Culture in Taiwan. He will be reading his paper in Chinese, and I will read the translation. Sukaina Habiballah has 4 poetry collections and 1 novel, The Barracks, from 2016, and a second novel coming out this year. She's received many awards, including in 2015 the Buland Ali al-Haidari Prize for Arabic Poetry, and the 2019 Nadine Shames Prize for Arab Screenwriters for her short film, Who Left the Door Open. Her poetry has been translated into 7 languages, and back home in Morocco, she teaches creative writing to youth. She, like Takako, is here thanks to the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs. Finally, but not least, Manuel Becerra joins us from Mexico City. He's the author of 6 books of poetry, including Instrucciones para matar un caballo, Instructions for Killing a Horse, which was translated into French in 2019. His work, which has won 6 National Poetry Prize awards, grapples with social issues including racism and socioeconomic disparity, and he uses his writing as a platform for community engagement, both at home and abroad. He's been awarded fellowships by the Foundation for Mexican Letters, the Secretary of Culture in Mexico City, and the Mexico City Institute for Culture. He also comes through the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs at the State Department. Please welcome our panelists and Takako.
Hello, my name is Takako Arai from Japan. Writing the Not Self and Me. I'm probably like a lot of other poets because my first book was a collection of love poems with some about heartbreak too. I could say that this work was a product of my romantic period. Back then, I focused on describing the self. However, after turning 30, I was no longer capable of all that romance. I began trying to write poems whose speaker was a not self. But at first, I just produced a pile of junk. I finally succeeded by writing as if I had taken on the identity of my mother. One possible difference between poetry and fiction is that in poetry, it's important for the I in the work to grow extremely close to the author's eye. Otherwise, the poem's language will end up lacking a strong rhythm. I found a way to bring those two eyes together, but the I in the work became a mysterious blend of the mother Yoshie and the daughter Takako. My mother was born into the main branch of the Arai family, which had been a presence in the city of Kiryu for over 20 generations. The family business was textiles, fabrics, and she lived through both its glory and ruin in the modern era. My mother's spirit was very fierce. When I saw Gone with the Wind, I thought that she resembled Scarlett O'Hara, despite looking nothing like Vivian Lee. She's very short and like this. By entering into and taking on the self of another, in this case, my mother, I started using my work to re-examine Japan's modern history and the sharp decline of regional Japan. In this way, writing the not-self is not limited to lyric poetry. In fact, I would say that it's taught me an approach to epic poetry. From that emerged my interest in the female shamans known as Miko. There are even a few blind Miko throughout the islands of Japan, who perform activities such as serving as mediums and maintaining oral folklore traditions. I myself don't go into a trance when I write, I think so. However, the origin of writing the not-self was surely stories conveyed by those shamans from long before what we know as modern literature. While playing the role of my mother, I was free not to worry about my responsibility as a writer. She's family, so she didn't complain about my poems. However, another aspect of writing not-self came to my attention when my interest in collapse as a poetic theme drew me to the Tohoku region of northeastern Japan after the Great Eastern Japan earthquake in 2011. I saw how writing the not-self involves taking information that belongs to others for writers' own use. I've repeatedly gone to the city of Ofunato in Iwate Prefecture, an area impacted by the disaster. But I haven't written any poems in which the I assumes the persona of those who died there or their loved ones. The only poem about the 2011 tsunami that I managed to write was about a shoe that washed up on the seashore. In other words, a requiem from the perspective of physical object. Did I hold back because I wasn't directly affected by the tragedy? Was it because I felt an ethical responsibility toward the victims? What really happened is that I reached my limit. Poetry is truly a mysterious form of literature. You write it yourself, and yet you also feel that something greater is writing through you. In this case, I was not chosen by the greater thing to write realistic poetry about people's experiences. I continue to have a strong interest in the Tohoku area, At its core, the not self I cultivated there isn't a tangible person. Instead, I'm exploring traditional tales and folk culture. I've been calling out to the various spirits present throughout the region. Perhaps my interest in Miko was my point of entry into the area. The work written from all of this has a stronger scent of death and blood than my earlier writing. On the day of the earthquake and tsunami, around 20,000 people suddenly lost their lives, and I believe that has had an indirect influence on me. It seemed that what the earthquake taught me was a form of spiritual epic poetry. In addition, as part of an ongoing project in the affected area, I've done things such as putting a book together with the older women of Ofunato, as well as working on a documentary about those women. I think that the ethics of writing the not-self lie in building an intimate and enduring relationship with the people tied to that region. Thank you for Joe's English translation. Thank you.
Valley Storm.
I speak Chinese. 今天的主题我说个故事来表达，因为没有人不喜欢听故事，而且我也只会说故事。50年前、100年前，现在也是如此。总之，西方冒险家普斯特在卡拉哈里沙漠里程的记录写成了《猎人之心》一书，其中达比生病了这一节读来令人印象深刻。达比是这支旅行队伍的向导，达比是布希曼人。旅行队伍来到柴内沙漠里的小绿洲一座休息站，达比就生病了，而且是毫无征兆地生起一场持续而巨大的病，连普斯特也莫名所以。普斯特正好看到负责柴内治安的索托族警官召集手下2名警员组成的警卫队，正进行着将警站旗杆顶上的旗子降下来的仪式，一如降旗典礼。但是令普斯特震惊的是，柴内方圆几百里几乎是个不毛之地，无人观礼。但是3个人穿着极其干净的制服举行降旗典礼，按照规定以英国皇家禁卫军检阅行列精准地进行。这警官全年都同样一丝不苟地遵循仪式规矩，在日出时升旗，在日落时降旗。有没有人观礼都一样，这到底是怎么一回事？我们先前不是说达比生病了吗？达比此刻眼睛紧闭，呼吸急促又出众，原来是整个殖民者的仪式令其恐惧。等到队伍一离开柴内，达比竟然不药而愈。其实对布希曼人来说，生命就是移动，如果移动的自由被剥夺，生命可能就会终止。也就是说，殖民者让布希曼人的移动不再自由。好吧，这行礼如仪的升旗仪式，让达比的故事被唤醒了，全族被歼灭的惨痛历史。好的，故事说完了。这是原住民布希曼人的故事，也是全球原住民的缩影。总是被迫使用优势民族的语言文字观看世界，并且展示不再完整的自我。当优势民族总要让少数民族使用他们的语言文字时，这世界最后会成为单调的一种颜色。颜色的名称叫做暴力。事实上，许多人忘了原住民与地球母亲总是拥抱在一起。 更忘了自己已经失去了拥抱地球的力量。所以，当我使用他人的文字书写，也不过就是让你们理解拥抱的力量。所以我不会讨好你们，除非你们学会了爱。Thank you.
Thank you. It's my honor to read a translation of the paper prepared by Lynn Wang, who is sitting to Wallace's left. She is an undergraduate psych major and Chinese major, and also an iCrew fellow, which is a research fellowship at the IWP. Writing the Not Self. I'll be discussing today's topic through the lens of a story because everyone loves hearing stories, and storytelling is my only forte. It was the same 50 years, 100 years ago, and it is still the same now. South African explorer Lawrence van der Post wrote the novel The Heart of the Hunter based on his journey into the Kalahari Desert. One of the chapters described a man named Dabe falling ill, which left me with a strong impression. Dabe was the local guide for the expedition team and a member of the Bushman tribe. When the expedition arrived at Sane, an oasis and rest stop at the heart of the desert, Dabe suddenly became ill. The illness was quite serious and unexpected. Even Post didn't know what had caused it. While in Sane, Post saw a corporal from the Suto tribe, accompanied by 2 of his policemen, performing the lowering of the colonial flag over the station masthead. All 3 wore spotless uniforms for the ceremony and carried out the prescribed drill with the precision of guardsmen on a royal parade. Post understood that the show wasn't done for their benefit because the corporal always raised and lowered the flag at sunrise and sunset with the same punctilious observance of form regardless of anyone witnessing the ceremony. So what does this have to do with Dabe's sickness? He was lying on the floor, his eyes tightly shut, breathing fast and harshly. As it turned out, his ailment was a physical manifestation of Dabe's fear of the outside world, and the colonial ceremonies he saw at Sane terrified him. As soon as the expedition got ready to leave Sane, Dabe was magically cured. In Bushman philosophy, to live means to travel. If the freedom to travel for hunter-gatherers is taken away from them, it is the same as taking their life. The arrival of the colonial world meant that the Bushmen were no longer free to travel. The fastidious flag ceremony in Dabe's stories awakened the somber history of colonial genocide of an entire tribe. This was the story I wanted to share with you, a story about the indigenous Bushman people, a microcosm of indigenous tribes everywhere, forced to adopt the language of the majority and view the world through a lens that is not there. Therefore, they are no longer full versions of themselves. When ethnic majorities started to force minorities to adopt their language and writing, the world became limited to a monochromatic palette. The name of that monochrome is violence. Many people forget that the indigenous people are one with Mother Nature, and they forget that they themselves have lost the ability to embrace the earth. So when I write using someone else's language, I am merely demonstrating what it means to embrace. It is not meant to be a form of flattery unless the dominant culture has learned how to love.
Hello. I will talk in this essay about the people who are walking in my veins. I think that writers are the first eco-friendly movement in the world, a movement that used the imagination to convert helpful and not harmful objects into a wonderful material called stories. I've moved inside and within this material all my life. Coleridge explained that we are not terrified by the dream we see. We see the dream to explain the horror we feel. Because dreams and writing, in my opinion, are made of the same material, all those stories we write are just a way to explain the multiple lives we have and all those people who are walking in our veins. I made my first self-narrative when I was only 3 years old. When I woke up one day to tell my parents that some aliens abruptly came through the window of my room and peed on my bed because their planet was too small and they didn't have a bathroom on it. Years later, I still do the same. I don't mean that I wet my bed. I mean that I still create other creators to take responsibility for the reality that I'm ashamed of. I was born in a city that seeks to erase its inhabitants and erase its own history. Something was always driving me to escape. Eventually, I did, and I moved to another one. In every novel I wrote, the escape continued. I ran and gasped across the map, Vietnam in my first novel, Spain in my second one. Still, my characters were always destined to come back to Casablanca like a ball bouncing against a wall. With every novel written, I feel my own unfinished escape from Casablanca. And I hear Cavafy mocking me, "You won't find a new country, you won't find another shore, this city will always pursue you." And I let myself paraphrase him and add, "Myself will always pursue me." Godard, the renowned French director, gave the answer to the question about where the stories of his films came from. It's not where you take things from, it's where you take them to. When I began my first novel, I was inspired by an old photo album that I once found in a forgotten attic in my home. What intrigued me especially was a snapshot of a young man sitting in a giant warplane, leaning his wrist in his gun. The look in his eyes would leave you with the same effect as Edward Munch's scream. It's like, "It's this self in the picture really you, Grandpa? Are those the same hands that often tickled me?" I would have never guessed that the same hands have ever carried the gun. "What did you see, Grandfather, that your young eyes look like two bullets in this picture?" My grandfather died when I was 5 years old. Thus, it was not possible to turn to him and hear his story. I wrote that novel because what reality offers us is not always enough, and because everyone around me seems to have decided to forget and not talk about the past. My grandfather had spent a few years in Vietnam serving as Khmer soldier in the French army in the Indochina War. Only later did I discover that other Moroccans who entered the same war as soldiers defected and lived in Vietnam for years before returning to Morocco with a family and stories that would be excluded from the official Moroccan history. I tried to speak about Moroccans who somehow found themselves involved in a war in a strange land, fighting a war that didn't belong to them, shouting slogans devoid of sense or foundation. They found themselves out of the blue with a gun in their hands and death in their hearts. This story bloomed into means of talking about generation of women who were part of the wars in Vietnam and Morocco, and the generation that succeeded. War is a man's game, in Virginia Woolf's word. Yet women are bound to pay the fuller part of price. The same was the case with the independence of my country. It never was a woman's independence. When writing the not-self, we become weightless and gain the ability to move within time. I may return to past to save an old song from being crushed beneath the wheels of oblivion. I may set up a tent in the future as a clairvoyant and read the borders on the world map as though there are lines in the map of a hand, and foresee the future that awaits this enormous creature. In all my novels and stories, every I wrote, as an interpreter says I, is designated for someone else. I created characters that were utterly different from me, yet through their eyes, as Duras said, I could see the reflection of myself. It's like donating your blood to someone else, like passing down life and perhaps your disease and lies to the character of your book. It's no longer possible to determine your blood from his blood. It's no longer possible to determine what really has happened and what hasn't. You can't tell the truth, because the life that moves before you on a paper is the truest, and it's all that matters.
Hi. The Mask and the Mirror. Imagine a person facing a mirror. Then imagine this person puts on a mask. What we witness here is two characters making a third, a dramatic voice. For the poet, creating a character, real or fictitious, and speaking through this character is like putting on a mask in front of a mirror. A monologue as began. According to Eliot, a poet has three voices. The first is the voice of the poet speaking with himself. The second is the one addressing the audience. And the third is the voice of the poet when he attempts to create a dramatic character speaking in verse. Let's focus on this last voice. Robert Browning was one of the best to perfect the mode of the dramatic monologue in which the poet assumes the identity of a character. Marcel Schwob does this masterfully in The Children's Crusade, and of course Edgar Lee Master in Spoon River Anthology, one of my favorite books of poetry. The use of the third person comes with a feeling of freedom. The character created is much more distant from the poet than the lyrical character who is usually identified with the author. The mask gives the poet the sense of ease and security. He needs to say what he might not say in another situation. The mask gives voice to thought. Among the reasons for which another used this dramatic mechanism is the impossibility of speaking for himself. What can sometimes not be said with exposed face can be conveyed through the author. In another sense, by assuming the form of the author, the poet comes to know himself. It is undeniable that the author puts part of himself in his characters. The author serves as a mirror. The things we dislike in another are the things we dislike about ourselves. Now, if the poet is an instrument in the service of poetry, an instrument through which his story can be written with the tools of inspiration and a process of daily work, then what happens when he creates a character? It's a game of mirror. In every poem, there is more than one voice. The author, the reader, his own first reader, and the lyrical character all speak. When the poet speaks for himself, he starts to talk about the author. I speak about myself because I am speaking about you. The poet builds a character, and this character is the one who dictates every trait, who creates his own how and when. Simultaneously, a form of self-acceptance happens through the author. The poet is all ears. He believes he can hear the ocean inside a shell. He lies to himself, pretends, and ultimately believes it. Maybe this isn't possible. He's attentive to all invisible signs in the search for his character. The poet is a pretender, as Pessoa says, and even pretends pain, the pain he really feels. Let's return to our first character, who is still in front of the mirror. It is possible that under the first mask, he will find a second, and under the second, a third, even more foreign, and so on to infinity until he doesn't even recognize his own face. Each new face is a circumstance. Behind each story, there's a character, and each poet is inhabited by more than oneself. Each poet is a chorus of voice. One takes possession of the character, and the character takes possession of us. In this way, we give life to our characters. I am, for example, my 15-year-old father living in a small town for the Mexico City. And I am my mother, and Emily Dickinson. I'm nobody, who are you? I am Julia Pastrana, and Gaspar Hauser, and Emmett Till, and I am Buffalo Bill. I am Chet Baker playing his golden trumpet. I am Judith painted by Gustav Klimt. I am Yoshihiro Ozu. I am nobody. In short, I is other. Thank you.